A few years back, in the months leading up to the release of Ghost of Tsushima, I decided to fix a big gap in my cinematic education by finally watching some or all of the famous samurai movies that I'd always heard about. With the popularity of Ghost of Tsushima since, and the brand new Shogun series getting rave reviews, there's never been a better time to finally dig into these classics yourself. I'm also going to list a few honorable mentions that didn't make the top list or apparent greats that I just haven't gotten to yet, so stick around to the end and hit the comments if you have any other great suggestions to look out for. Before we begin, I also just want to note that every film was viewed in its original Japanese. And man, there's just nothing quite like the way that the Japanese boom out orders and exclamations. It's just awesome. Okay, with that all said and done, let's jump into 6 of some of the best samurai movies that you can check out, presented in no particular order. We kick things off with Seven Samurai from Akira Kurosawa, a black and white great from 1954. Hailed as not just one of the best samurai movies, if not the best ever made, but as one of the best films of all time. Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai tells the tale of a group of samurai that come together to help a small village defend themselves against bandits who are set to ransack their homes and steal all their crops. If this story sounds mildly familiar, that's because Seven Samurai was eventually remade and adapted into the famous western called The Magnificent Seven.
777, The Magnificent Seven.
And heavily inspired an episode of The Mandalorian and a whole bunch of other things you may have seen.
Who are you? The Three Amigos!
It's worth noting that this film is just shy of 3.5 hours long, which might be off-putting for some, so I can even recommend maybe splitting it into 2 nights if need be. But it's worth it, and a great cast of characters are brought to life thanks to fantastic performances.
Did you know that?
This includes a wise old leader played by Takashi Shimura, who, fun fact, becomes the inspiration for Yoda in Star Wars years later.
Now you know!
And a completely unhinged rogue warrior who isn't even really a samurai, played by the great Toshiro Mifune, who really just wants a good excuse to get into a fight. There's a reason everyone talks about Seven Samurai when the topic of samurai films come up, and that's really just because it ultimately delivers a very heartfelt story of people coming together to help, and also gives viewers like us a very good overall feel of feudal Japan, the samurai, and the more common folk of that time. While the cinematography in Seven Samurai is notable and even studied, it was another Kurosawa film we're looking at that really blew my face off, where cinematography and the use of light is concerned, as well as motion, but we'll get back to that one in a bit, because next up we've got 2010's 13 Assassins. If you like the idea of traditional old samurai films but still feel like you need a few kick-ass action scenes and some modern comforts, including color, then 13 Assassins is for you. And let me tell you, this movie turned out way better than I expected, and the end was incredibly satisfying. 13 Assassins bears a very close resemblance to Seven Samurai actually. In this case, however, instead of defending a small village, a samurai is tasked with putting together a team with the goal of killing the man who is next in line to the throne. You'd think that the assassins were the bad guys, except any reservations you may have all disappear when you realize that their target is essentially the Japanese equivalent of that little King Joffrey shithead from Game of Thrones.
Very amusing.
The deader the better, if you know what I mean. While it has the proper old school feel of a traditional film, 13 Assassins ups the action significantly with excellent choreography, a helping of large explosions, and even a touch of slightly out of place CGI here and there. Right, so back to that Kurosawa film I mentioned earlier. You know, the one with the awesome cinematography? This is 1961's Yojimbo. Like Seven Samurai, Yojimbo was also remade into a famous western. This one titled A Fistful of Dollars, which as you know famously launched Clint Eastwood into superstardom.
It was at this moment that he knew. He f***ed up.
Toshiro Mifune, who I mentioned before, impressed me to no end when I watched Yojimbo, because he was just so different from his character in Seven Samurai that I almost didn't recognize him. While he was an adventure-seeking nutcase in Seven Samurai, Yojimbo has him playing a calm, collected, and very cool Ronin who finds himself in the middle of a war between two factions in a small village. The fun really starts when he decides to play them against each other by hiring out his allegiance and skills to the highest bidder. His character very much feels like some of the inspiration for Han Solo, as you slowly realize that his cool, uncaring exterior is actually just housing a very good heart underneath. There's a lot to love in this film, but nothing that comes close to its exquisite cinematography. The use of clearly defined dark and light shades completely transformed my understanding and appreciation for black and white film. I can easily count nearly a dozen shots from this film that would go well on the wall as a mounted still photo. But that would actually be a little bit of a crime, because the other powerful element, which is a Kurosawa trademark, is his use of weather and the elements to bring motion to his scenes and mimic the tone of the story or intentions of a character. This is actually a big feature that they brought to Ghost of Tsushima, where they used the wind to actually give you direction and point you towards your objectives. Out of all of the films that I watched, I found that Yojimbo was maybe the most charming of the bunch. This was in small part due to the incredible performance that Mifune was able to bring to his scenes. Don't miss this one. Next up we have Harakiri from 1962, one of the films to not be directed by Akira Kurosawa. Harakiri is a very slow burn, which mostly takes place in a courtyard. A Ronin, who if you didn't know is the name given to a masterless samurai, has requested the use of a house's courtyard to perform the honorable act of suicide by disembowelment with your own sword known as, you guessed it, Harakiri. Turns out that lots of Ronin have been asking to off themselves in rich people's courtyards because of how often they'd be convinced to just take some money and bugger off instead. The samurai of the house decides to call this Ronin on his bluff though. I don't want to spoil too much from there because I just know that while you're in for the slow burn I mentioned, there's quite an amazing payoff and some twists that are worth the journey too. I will however mention that towards the end of this film, there is a scene that involves a duel and a hell of a lot of wind, something which feels really very Ghost of Tsushima, and it's fantastic. This film was remade in 2011 as Harakiri Death of a Samurai. I haven't seen it myself, but from what I've heard it sounds like it's a better idea to stick with the original. So as far as Kurosawa films have gone, we've discussed Seven Samurai and Yojimbo, and the next one is called Sanjuro from 1962, and it's a direct sequel to Yojimbo featuring the same main character. The movie is actually called Sanjuro because that's the name of the main character, but it's a name he gives himself when he's asked on the spot, and he just sort of makes it up. Sanjuro sees our hero non-hero mixed up in the middle of a good lot of nonsense once more. This time around he finds himself caught up in a political conspiracy and once again gets swept up in a story that he'd rather not be a part of, or so he puts on. Sanjuro shows a different side of Japan to Yojimbo and really lets you enjoy watching this hero outsmart the enemies and even hide the fact that he cares about the good guys. The comedy is really good too. Sanjuro is actually a little bit of a big deal because a specific scene at the end made a huge impression on modern cinema, anime and many other mediums, including Ghost of Tsushima. I don't want to say too much, but let's just say that if you've ever watched a movie or an anime where someone gets cut and just a massive spray of blood comes shooting out of them, it's because of this movie. And the best part is it actually happened as a mistake as a result of a malfunction with some of the special effects equipment. The director actually kind of liked it and decided to lean into it and, well, cinema was changed forever. Last up we have a bit more of a modern movie that even I didn't think was gonna make the list. The Last Samurai actually came out over 20 years ago already, back when Tom Cruise only looked 30, as opposed to now where he looks like 35. Upon rewatching The Last Samurai for the first time since its release, I struggled to decide if I actually liked it or not. It all just felt so typical. But the major reason I've put this on the list is quite simple. If you really need something familiar to your Hollywood blockbuster needs, then this is a great way to introduce you to the world of feudal Japan and the samurai. One of the best things about all the movies I've mentioned before is that they're compelling because they don't follow formulas, and you really just don't know what they're gonna do next. The Last Samurai comfortably slots itself in the typical Hollywood groove that has a need to make other places the playground of the hero man, in this case Tom Cruise, a war veteran who gets captured by samurai while training an opposing army in Japan. Surprise surprise, after some time spent with the other people, he decides that he likes them and wants to join them. Whether it's Dances with Wolves, Point Break, The Fast and Furious or Avatar, you've definitely seen this movie before. That said, it's still a well-made and enjoyable film. And it's got a great cast that includes Ken Watanabe, who you might know from Inception, Godzilla and Batman Begins, and most notably, Hiroyuki Sanada, the star of 2024 Shogun, Scorpion in the recent Mortal Kombat movie, and all-round badass in a host of other films, both old and new, but including John Wick Chapter 4 and Bullet Train. So if you're really looking for something to kickstart your adventure without being too much of a departure from what you're used to, this isn't a bad place to start. And that brings us to the end of the main list, so we're just going to get to some quick honorable mentions. These are movies that didn't make the top list for some reason, or it's something that I haven't seen yet but have told that they were really good or worth watching. Hidden Fortress, Rashomon, Ran, Throne of Blood, and Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2. Hidden Fortress was actually one of the big inspirations for George Lucas when he was making Star Wars.
Stuck up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder.
Who's scruffy looking?
And Rashomon was actually quite special, not quite a samurai movie, but it's the kind of movie that really makes you think about looking at things from different angles and different perspectives. And it's something that's quite different but heavily inspired by all of these things, and as a huge Tarantino fan, I just couldn't leave out Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2, because so many elements of these original movies just get poured into those two films with a lot of love from Tarantino. But like I mentioned earlier, if you have any other great suggestions, I'd like to hear them, and I'm sure other people would too, so hit the comments and let us know, whether it's classic movies, animes, series, you name it. I'm now officially a samurai movie superfan, and I just can't wait to catch up on even more of them. Oh, and one last thing.
Hi, my name is Tony, and this is Every Frame a Painting.
If you want to know more about Akira Kurosawa and why he's just such a genius that inspired generations of filmmakers, I highly recommend you check out this fantastic video called Akira Kurosawa Composing Movement by the channel Every Frame a Painting. The channel sadly doesn't make videos anymore, but the videos are still up for you to watch. And this video is basically what convinced me to go on the samurai film adventure to begin with. So if you loved Ghost of Tsushima, or you're going to play it soon on PC, or you're really excited for the sequel, or even just someone who jumped on Shogun recently, I hope that this video helps you dig deeper into this great cinematic world. Of course, our content usually revolves around games and reviews, but I love this stuff so much, and it just crossed over with the games and the movies so well that it's just something I just felt passionate about getting out in video form. If you liked the video, please hit the like button to let me know. And if you want to see more videos, some like this, but mostly more game reviews, please hit the subscribe button and join us. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you soon.